Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I'd like to welcome Chris Southworth and Nick Davies to the panel discussion. Interesting, we're switching it around this time. So rather than you guys interviewing the panel, it will be the other way round. My name is Dipesh Patel, editor at Trade Finance Global, and on behalf of Trade Finance Global, we're delighted to support and be media partners of the C4DTI Digital Trade Conference and Award. So this is day 3. It's the final day of the conference, and to our Trade Finance Talks listeners as well, welcome both. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
So let's start off with, this is a bit of a wrap of the conference, and to those that might have missed a few of the sessions, it would be good to just hear a summary of the key themes. So we'll start by discussing some of those key themes, unpicking some of the areas that were discussion points, that were contentious, etc. And then we'll turn it around into more of a future looking view in terms of how we can future proof trade finance, what it means, because certain trade finance is undergoing quite a bit of a makeover, but it's quite hard to actually grapple and see what the effect that's having on the wider community. Nick, let's start with you. Can you give a quick introduction as well, and then just unpick some of the key themes that you've seen over the last couple of days?
Yes, very happy to do so. Yeah, so just in case nobody's picked that up, my name is Nick Davis. I'm the director of the Centre for Digital Trade and Innovation here in the ICC United Kingdom. And I must admit, as the first participator, as my first conference of this type, it's been a really positive experience for me. And I thought that the level of engagement and the interest and enthusiasm shown by everybody, both virtually and in person on the day yesterday, was absolutely fantastic. And I'm absolutely convinced that I didn't hear anything over the 3 days that suggested that we weren't needed, that we weren't in the right sort of area, and that there was a big prize to be had. I think we heard from a broad range of the stakeholders, and on the first day we heard how all the tools are in place, the legislation, the standards, the treaties, the technology. On the second day we heard that there are mechanisms for collaboration. We are learning from the past, and we're able to plan things so that we don't repeat the mistakes that have been made, or the different approaches that are needed to the future. And today we heard that actually there is an awful lot going on already, so we are not starting from scratch by any means. There is plenty of stuff that's been done, globally, and by some very big and very reputable institutions. So there really is a real opportunity here to show that this can all be done, from the master of the rolls, who's the second most senior judge in the country, down to the tech providers, to the banks, and to the ports. Everybody is in a really positive frame of mind. So I'm really enthused by this, and I hope that we can build on that over the coming 12 months. And I sincerely hope that if and when we get back together this time next year, we'll have been able to make some real progress.
Thank you very much. And Chris, I think you said in one of your recent white papers that the UK needs to lead and put a rocket under COVID recovery, unlocking $9 trillion of growth in 2026. So can you just explain who the key stakeholders were that were attending the conference, and can you talk about what the opportunity is and what that common goal is for the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. Obviously, we'll crunch the numbers more, but I mean, looking at the numbers so far, I think we've just shy of 1,000 people have been participating this week from every single region in the world. It's unbelievable. I think it's double the size of last year, and it's certainly the largest conference of this type on this agenda in the whole of the ICC network. And I think that that's a reflection of the role that we're playing, which I hope is positive and constructive, and trying to find solutions and being proactive. but also the activity in the market and the interest in the market. I completely agree with Nick. The level of engagement, the quality of the discussion is unbelievable. I mean, it really is, and you can really see the depth of work going on, and that's coming through in the conversation. So we're really getting now into all the practicals, which is the questions, of course, that we get asked. You know, we very much wanted to sort of present this conference as an opportunity to get into the practical detail, the opportunities, the challenges. You know, how do we move forward? I think all of that has come out in the conversations, both in the networking opportunities, but also in the sessions themselves. And to have that global engagement is exceptional, because the only way we're going to do this is if we're working together. And I think that's really come through this concept of collaboration, working together, not leaving anyone behind. This is a common endeavor. That, I think, for me, is a huge takeaway. I think in terms of our role, obviously this is a global activity, so we've all got to play a role. And I think we've seen voices from other parts of the world that are also doing amazing things. I mean, Benjamin from Mombasa yesterday was amazing. You know, there's stuff going on which is exceptional. But I think we you know, there is a role, isn't there, for organizations like ICC to have a clear vision, clear roadmap, clear direction of travel, and to just keep that leadership coming. You know, just keep us pointing in that same direction, keep aligning, keep catalyzing, not be afraid to jump in and provide solutions into the market, test systems where other people are not testing them, so that we're also helping move the agenda forward. And I like to think that, you know, that's playing a positive role in getting everybody fired up. And then, of course, in June, I think the change in English law is going to put rocket boosters under the whole environment, because we've talked about legal has come up in almost every session. I think it's so important, this legal environment piece. English law is not going to solve every problem, obviously, but what it will do is it will give us a legal environment at scale, which we've never had before. It will open up options which we've never had before at an international scale. And that's going to be really interesting how we all respond to that. The big question for all of us is, you know, or the challenge is to leverage it. We've got to leverage it, because it won't solve everything. We've still got to keep banging the drum to countries to reform laws, but it will give us a really good interim platform where we can digitalize whole supply chains, whole processes. All the commercial activity can go effectively digital. The only requirement really is to, well, either use Singaporean law or English law. But I mean, that's a great combination, and it's a great start.
Thank you very much. So one debate that piqued quite a lot of interest yesterday was really one around learning from the past. And you know, we'll start from the past, we'll move to the present, and then take a future-looking view. Nick, so the Gartner hype cycle is often used to describe a lot the advancement of technological innovations. I'd probably say we're at the slope of enlightenment now for trade tech following the recent failures. Can you summarize some of the key findings, and also what your thoughts are on learning from some of the past things we've seen in the market?
Yes, I think both Chris and I are, in a sense, we're both very Tiggerish in our approach to these things. We always look on the positive side, and there's just a little voice in the back of my head thinking, what about the people who weren't at the conference? What about the people who still have doubts? What about the corporates who we really need to get engaged in the agenda here? You know, we made quite a lot of reference over the course of the 3 days that, you know, the dial is still moving very slowly on the increase. The law and the technology and the treaties and the standards will all make a difference, but it's that engagement from the real trading communities that will make the difference. So I think you're right. I think there's been quite a lot of overselling and hype concerning the technology that does underpin this. But I think what really reassured me about the proceedings over these last 3 days was the breadth of the stakeholders who were all saying this is doable. You know, it's almost a given now that we've got the tools in place. So when you get people like Sir Geoffrey Ross, when you get people like a senior trade financier from Lloyds Bank, when you get people like the CEO of various companies saying we can do this and we can do this together. In fact, we must do it together. I think that really does show that there is something in this, that this isn't flash in the pan, hype or sales pitches. This is real stuff, and this is real stuff that can have real benefits. We've just now got to take those baby steps towards making this a reality, but without losing sight of the fact that there is a transformative vision out there. So I make no apology for having a vision. But what I won't be doing is expecting it to be delivered on Monday. We will need to take those steps towards it. So I think that breadth of consensus is something that is really encouraging in that regard.
Chris, what's the vision? I mean, interoperability and technologically agnostic platforms and companies were talked about a lot, and also the different levels of interoperability. You know, it's all very well talking about it, but there's organizational, there's legal, there's tech, there's semantic. What is the wider vision for where we're looking at in terms of a trade ecosystem?
Well, there's sort of vision, and then there's the approach, isn't there? I think the vision, is that we are simply modernizing the world trading system. And I think we've got to be very clear in our articulation of that. We're not talking about a project or a program or an initiative. We are modernizing the trading system so it's fit for purpose for the next 100 or 200 years. And that, of course, means moving into the digital economy. And we've got to get that message clearly across to everybody. Because if we're not doing this, why are we doing trade activities overall? I think this is getting the environment right. One of the takeaways, I think, from some of the sessions is, it's a question really, are we focusing enough on the environment? We know there are legal barriers. We know we need to develop common standards. I'm not worried about technology. I'm not worried that we don't have enough brains in the room or on the job. But we've got to get the environment right for everybody so that the market can flourish. And then we can say, okay, what's the failure next, and let's try and solve the failure. But if we get the environment right, everything will scale. I think that's really important. And then in terms of the approach, 100%, this has got to be about interoperability. I think, interestingly, being in Asia in the last couple of weeks and then coming back over here into Europe, there are different approaches to this. You can cut the cake in different ways. That is completely okay, whether you take a platform approach or a non-platform approach. The key is interoperability. The platforms, the systems, the processes just need to talk to each other. And let's keep it simple. Ultimately, it's about information flowing. And information can only flow if it's in a standardized format. It's not much more complicated than that, really. There's lots of hardwiring, but let's please not talk about the hardwiring when we're talking to companies, because it confuses everybody, it scares people. We don't need to do it. All we're saying here is, look, there's a cheaper, faster, simpler way of trading. It's more secure, it's more sustainable, or at least it will enable a more sustainable system. And this is how you do it. And here's a solution. Here's an example. This is the benefit. That's the way we convince and persuade companies. But it's about interoperability, I think, number one, 100%. It's about open systems, number two, so that we don't have these closed. I mean, having said that, I do think the future will be a bit of a mixed economy. That I think there'll always be a place for closed systems, but it's about having both. And at the moment, we don't have that choice. And I think, to bring the costs down, make it more accessible, we have to have that open environment alongside the closed environment. I think those two things will live together. And then, from an institutional perspective, which is where obviously our job, we have to be agnostic. And I think that's important for governments too, is, let the market come in, and, anyone who's sitting certainly in the UK, but we're not alone in Asia. There are technology solutions coming in almost every week, and it's really interesting because they are varied. You're starting to see different solutions in different areas, and that opens up all sorts of possibilities. And I'm sure there'll be lots more innovation. We've just got to stay agnostic to it, so we don't. We make sure that we're future proof. It's all about future proofing, and I think in terms of constituencies, I completely agree with Nick. We've got to be very conscious. There are a lot of, the majority of companies are actually not in the room, you know, and they're a long way away from where we are. So that educational piece is really, really important. You know, we've got to get the word out and give people practical solutions to how they can participate in the system.
Thanks, Chris. And going back to those practical examples and case studies, Chris, can you give? We heard quite a few real live case studies over the past couple of days. Can you give any? What's your favorite example of stuff that's live right now?
Well, you see, that's an interesting point. Obviously, we've spent a lot of time with the finance industry, so there's always good examples in that space. And in many ways, they've been sort of ahead of the curve because they very much kind of driving a lot of this agenda. I was really interested in today's session on food and drink. So, you know, the question I'm asking myself is how quickly can we get to tipping point where digitalized trade becomes the norm? And how fast can we do that? Because once we get there, the market will look after itself. It will just drive itself, and we can focus on other areas where you know the market needs support. And then when you look at it like that, it's all about strategy, and it's all about tactics, and it's all about being smart and clever about how we go about things. And if you look at the bulk of trade, you know, look at the high value, high volume. That's why we're focusing on legal reform in the G7. That's why we're focusing on the G20, the big economies. That's 80% of world trade. But if you look at it from a sectoral perspective, that's also quite interesting because there are 4 or 5 sectors that really make a huge difference. It's auto, it's pharma, it's commodities, it's food and drink, you know, retail. You know, if we home in, and we had a perfect example today from the food and drink, Mellon & Co, you know, giving really clear examples, and the business cases are quite different, you know, and that's interesting. It's about food waste, it's about food security, it's about speed, it's that faster bit. And that's different. And if you remember last year, we talked about this a little bit, that each different constituency has a slightly different business case. For some, it's about getting rid of all the bureaucracy. For some, it's about risk. Others, it's about sustainability. And then others, it is about speed. It's about how do you get over that border as quickly as you can and get the product. And I really like the focus on let's pass the benefit down to the consumer, to the buyer, to the client. And it's not just about removing cost, is it? It's about making sure that cost reduction, that cost benefit trickles down the system so everybody benefits. I think I really like that today because that's exactly the examples that we need. We just need them in other sectors too.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Nick, I know BIMCO gave some good examples and case studies around the iron ore piece and something like 45 responsible for 45 million bills of lading or something like that. What examples kind of piqued your interest over the last few days?
Well, I think if I may blow a little bit of our own trumpet here, it's the Arctic one. We're literally next week on the 14th of April. A consignment of plastic molded pipes will be leaving Felixstowe, bound for Singapore. And although at the moment there will need to be a paper bill of lading to get it onto the ship, we will be running a parallel digital process, and it will run end to end with the military grade security that we heard Barry Child talk about yesterday. We will be getting an academic at Teesside University to assess the difference between the cost and the time associated with the paper process and with the digital. And we will play that back critically, not to you or to the ICC or to the banks or anybody else, but to the user, to the exporter themselves. And we will ask them to verify that and for them to say, look what we've saved on this transaction, doing it digitally. And then you can do what you like with those figures. You can take that, you know, $5 saving, whatever it is, and you can multiply it by whatever figure you like. And I can guarantee you it will be big. And that is the sort of thing that I think will really turn the dial on this. And that's not a big OEM. That's a smallish plastic molding company in the Midlands doing something innovative, and let's face it, quite brave, but doing it because they recognize that things can be done that way. And it reflects what, as Chris said, Mellon and Co., the worthy winners of the award last night, because they've been doing it for some time. And Justin Szymborski, if you've ever heard him speak, as we did at the House of Lords, you know, he cannot understand why everybody isn't doing this. And he puts it in a very blunt way that I'm sure neither Chris nor I would get away with. But he is very passionate about this. And you know, the more I think about it, the more I hear from those sorts of people, the more I think it's a no-brainer. Just do it. You know, that's the message, I think.
No, thank you. And Nick, how do we scale this and bring this upstream? Because I imagine as the transactions get bigger, more complex, or there are multiple smaller transactions with numerous actors, logistics companies, the trade financiers, the legal guys, and the other actors. How do we scale and grow these transactions?
Yes, so I think that came up quite a lot over the 3 days, and we heard a lot about customer engagement, around bringing people together, around collaborating, and about standards and so on. I think that's the sort of how. But I think it was Nolan right at the beginning in one of our early sessions said it's about the people. It's not about the tech, it's not about the money, it's not about the documents themselves, it's about the people. So we just need to bring those people with it. You know, remember that there is a Bob the warehouseman with a clipboard. There is a Eric the receipts clerk tapping away at his laptop in the receivables building. There are blokes and women on the boats loading this stuff up. We've got to bring those people with us, and we've got to get them to realize that things are capable of being done differently. And I think the other thing that emerged is simplification. You know, the reason why we have 40 or 50 different documents involved in an international trade process is because nobody's ever taken a step back and said, let's start again. It's always been, let's just build a little bit more on what we've done for centuries. Here is an opportunity, with all the things that are going on, for us to take a step right back and say, what do we actually need to do a safe, secure, environmentally efficient and cost-effective international transaction? And I think if we boil it down, I think I may have said this a few times, so forgive me if I'm repeating it. We need 3 things. What is it? Who owns it? Who's paying for it? The certificate of origin, the bill of lading, and the promissory note or the ledger of credit. If we can digitalize those 3 functions, get them confirmed in the same digital environment, enter the data only once, and have the same data matching those 3 functions, that to me is transformation. And that will mean something to those people and will be much more obvious to them than any reference to electronic bills of lading or the electronic trade documents bill or letters of credit and so on. All of that stuff is all pretty opaque to them. But I think if we can get the narrative, the story that we're telling down to those simple, not simplistic, but simple terms, then I think people will come with us.
Let's go back to the business benefit of this. And Nick, I love that. What's in it, who owns it, and who's paying for it? Chris, what's the business benefit of digitalizing these documents? Who benefits? Is it the banks? Is it the corporates? Is it the SMEs? And how so? Because from what I heard yesterday, it's not necessarily just about the cost saving.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, that, isn't it? I mean, I think it's interesting, this simplification as well. You know, and the good news is it's not just us saying it. You know, you heard it from the UK government saying it. I mean, it's pretty dramatic, and you also heard it from most of the pilots, people actually doing the work. You know, we're all spotting the opportunities to dramatically simplify trade. You know, we don't need to do trade in the next 100 years in the same way we did it. And let's please not digitalize a 100-year ago process and make that the next 100 years. Let's grab the opportunity. I'm all up for that. And it looks like others are too. So I think that's really radical. I think it's getting actually quite difficult to explain the business benefits in a simple way, because there's so many of them. I mean, we started off just, at quite a basic level, saying, look, it's cheaper, it's faster, it's simpler. This will lead to a more sustainable system. It's the enabler to the sustainable system. That's all come out in the conversations a lot. It's more secure. That's come out in the conversations. But we're now hearing lots of nuances, aren't we? Whether it's risk, and I think even for investors, we've got to talk more to the investors, because if you're putting, big investment into a solution, then, let's invest a bit in the environment, because that de-risks the investment, right? So you've got, risk management's in there. All that AML, KYC bureaucracy, let's get rid of a lot of that stuff. We can't get rid of it all, but we can definitely make it smarter. It's the speed piece. How do we get goods over the borders, especially perishables, in a smarter way? It's that traceability piece that's come up today. That's interesting, especially for high value goods. Again, technology solutions are in the market. How do we scale them, create the environment for them to scale? So I think there are so many benefits. Even if you look at digital identities alone, it's a long shopping list. In a way, our challenge is to condense it and tailor it and nuance the arguments now. We've got to go, we can't just make a generic, it's faster, simpler, cheaper. We have to do that, don't get me wrong. But when we're going to constituencies, I think we have to be quite specific and say, for you, these are the benefits. These are the examples where we can prove those are the benefits. The good news for all of us are, when we did the original business cases, the numbers were huge. Do you remember that? There were 9 trillion in the G7 and 1 trillion. I mean, it was just, almost eye-watering figures. And we didn't know at that time, what's this actually worth at company level? But every single example is dramatic. It's 40% here, it's 50% there, it's 8 days to 1 day. Those are the examples. What CFO or CEO is going to look at that and say, that's a bad idea? It's efficiency, isn't it? Every business is great at being competitive. We just need to put those examples into the public realm. And I think that, to your earlier question, is really crucial. How do we scale? We've got to communicate. We can't hold this in a bubble of people. We've got to get it out there so that, people can make rational business decisions, which is exactly what the private sector is amazing at. They will do that. And that's when the market will really move at scale, I think. But the business case is huge. We have to really think about how we narrate that. How do we articulate that? It's going to be a whole brochure at the rate we're going at the moment.
Yeah, but I think that's good. And I think you've succinctly summarized it. There's the AML, KYC piece, there's the risk piece, there's the speed piece, provenance, sustainability, etc., etc. Let's talk about the act, the Electronic Trade Documents Act, or the bill that's coming through Parliament, because obviously there's now tons and tons of rhetoric. Everyone's very exciting. Someone said yesterday we should celebrate the success, but I don't think that if that passes the House of Commons in a month's time, I don't think that every company overnight is going to change. So moving on to a future looking piece, what does that journey look like from now until the bill is enacted, and then to truly digitalize some of those paper documents, the certificates of origin, bills of lading, and prom notes? Nick.
Go for it.
Oh, sorry.
Well, yes, I think we heard very succinctly from Sir Geoffrey and others yesterday that the bill is just the first step, and I quite like Lord Holmes's phrase on this. It's the best piece of legislation that nobody's ever heard of, and why should they? It's just an enabler, and in fact it doesn't actually change very much at all. It doesn't change the basis upon which trade is conducted. It just says that if you do it digitally, it shall have the same effect as if you do it on paper. It's beautifully simple. But the phrase that I think that struck me, and Sir Geoffrey did emphasize this, is that it depends on, I forget the exact phrase, I think it's reliable system or an effective system. There must be an effective system within which those techno-legal functions take place. So that's good possession and rivalrous transfer must be conducted in a reliable system. And I think our job between now and the Act becoming fully enacted and in its immediate, after its passage, is to show that we can create those effective and reliable systems wherein that techno-legal functionality can be undertaken. And that's why it's great that we've actually got the lawyers who understand the tech, like Professor Green, like Miriam Goldsby, like some of the others we heard from, Guy and others, on our shoulders saying, yeah, that works, or no, that doesn't work, or what you need here is that extra bit of stuff, so instead of us doing the techno stuff, then going back to the lawyers and them saying you can't do that, it's actually them being in the room as we're doing it and saying, yes, you can do that, or them saying, actually, you need a bit of tech that does this, and then we get the techies delivering on that techno function, that legal function. So it's great. It's great to have lawyers in the room who understand the tech. It's also great to have techies in the room who understand the law, and that's brilliant.
Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
I think there's two ways of looking at it. I mean, I think there's the legislation itself. I mean, you know, my mind now is on the next frontier. I mean, June is around the corner, so we don't have a lot of time between now and June. So we don't need to worry too much about that. It's literally around the corner, a matter of weeks now. So really, really exciting. I'm now thinking of the next frontier. So the conversations I'm having are around, you know, where else in common law jurisdictions can we scale? Or at least use the electronic trade documents bill as a model. Can we do that across the Commonwealth? Where, you know, are there any other jurisdictions where we can follow a similar approach? So it's about scaling the approach, because I do think it's a very smart piece of legislation. You know, it's not possible in every jurisdiction, we know that, but the fact that it doesn't change the base law means you don't have to get into this huge exercise of trying to understand everything that's contained within that law. It's just almost an amendment, and it's a very neat way of modernizing the system, but you keep the foundations the same. You can see how attractive that would be to governments who either don't have the capacity or frankly don't have the time or the political will to go through a major exercise. So I think it offers a really kind of neat solution, and I think other governments will be interested, but we've got to get that word out and go and talk to governments and say, hey, look, we think we've got a solution. And